All right.
A bit early for my taste.
Yeah, tell me about it.
There it is.
All right.
She loves that hammer.
Let's bring the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting of Thursday, April 10th, 2025. It's a Selectboard meeting. It's a special meeting. Bring it to order. And the first order of business is to ask John Potter, has this meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it was properly warned.
Thank you very much. Next item is a very happy item to notify the town of the professionalism and grace with which the 3 members of our staff performed at the SIT multiple building fire. And so I will turn that over to Oscar to begin.
Sure. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you want to step forward, please?
Each of us is going to read one of these. I'm starting with Carol. So, and this I think it might be my first ever motion, and it's a nice long one. Whereas on Wednesday, March 26th, 2025, wrong page, a fire at the School for International Training displaced 126 people, creating an urgent need for emergency shelter and food services. And whereas Recreation and Parks Director Carol Lalott, serving as the town's emergency shelter coordinator, immediately mobilized resources and established a fully functioning emergency shelter within hours of the incident. And whereas Carol procured and delivered meals from local vendors, ensured timely coordination with the Red Cross and SIT staff, and maintained communications with the Emergency Operations Center for all shelter operations from emergency response through recovery. And whereas her detailed attention to the unique housing and dietary needs of those affected, combined with her compassion, professionalism, and community-first mindset, resulted in a successful and dignified response for all involved. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Brattleboro Select Board does hereby recognize and commend Recreation and Parks Director Carol Lalott for her outstanding service as Emergency Shelter Coordinator during this emergency. Her actions reflect the highest standards of public service and are deserving of this formal recognition and the town's enduring appreciation. Be it further resolved that this proclamation be shared publicly as a testament to her commendable service. Thank you,
Great.
Carol.
Give this. Amanda? Okay.
Town of Brattleboro, Vermont proclamation of commendation recognizing the exemplary service of Assistant Department of Public Works Director Peter Lynch. Whereas on Wednesday, March 26, 2025, the town of Brattleboro responded to a major emergency involving multiple fires on the School for International Training campus, displacing over 120 students and impacting multiple buildings. And whereas Assistant Director of Public Works Peter Lynch, serving as Acting Emergency Management Director during this incident, coordinating the emergency response and recovery with outstanding professionalism and clarity. And whereas he demonstrated exemplary communication and leadership, keeping the emergency management team, department heads, town leadership, and external partners aligned during a fast-moving and complex emergency. And whereas his ability to bring together key local and state partners in a short period of time while maintaining calm, focused coordination contributed significantly to the success of both the emergency response and transition to recovery. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Brattleboro Select Board does hereby recognize and commend Assistant Department of Public Works Director Peter Lynch for his exemplary service as Acting Emergency Management Director during this emergency. His actions reflect the highest standards of the town of Brattleboro and are deserving of this formal recognition and enduring appreciation. Be it further resolved that this proclamation be shared publicly as a testament to his commendable service, adopted by the Brattleboro Select Board this 8th day of April, 2025.
Recognizing the exemplary leadership and service of Assistant Chief Chuck Keir. Whereas on Wednesday, March 26, 2025, the Brattleboro Fire Department responded to multiple fires across the School for International Training SIT campus, home to 126 students and numerous staff and visitors. And whereas Assistant Chief Chuck Keir assumed command early in the incident and demonstrated exceptional leadership in managing a complex and fast-evolving emergency scene involving multiple fire locations, and whereas he acted decisively to identify electrical hazards, shut down the power to the entire campus, and ensure the coordinated deployment of mutual aid and safety of all responders and civilians, and whereas his calm demeanor, clear communication, and proactive incident management prevented injuries and contributed significantly to the successful containment of the fires and protection of the campus population. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Brattleboro Select Board does hereby recognize and commend Assistant Chief Chuck Keir for his exemplary leadership and service during this emergency. His performance reflects the highest standards of the Brattleboro Fire Department and is deserving of this formal recognition and lasting appreciation. Be it further resolved that this proclamation be shared publicly as a testament to his commendable service, adopted by the Brattleboro Select Board this 8th day of April, 2025.
We'll take a brief 2-minute recess to congratulate our staff. May be asked, but not compelled, to state their name and address. Members of the public must be acknowledged by the chair before speaking and shall address their comments to the chair, who may or may not choose to interrogate anyone further based on the speaker's request. Members of the public must await their turn to speak and not interrupt others. A member of the public may only speak more than once on the same agenda item, time permitting, with the consent of the chair, and only after every other member of the public has been given an opportunity to speak on an item. Order must be observed by all people attending the select board meeting, whether in person or electronically. No clapping or other outbursts. No person may disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of the meeting or interrupt any person while they were speaking. And no party, representative of a party, witness, or speaker shall be permitted to make personal attacks on another speaker, a member of the select board, or any person whatsoever. No person shall be permitted to interrogate another speaker or any person present at the hearing without that person's consent and without the permission of the presiding officer given in advance of any such questions. And the chair will follow a process to address any disruption to a meeting as needed to restore order. So, there we are, another happy note. Town manager, do you have comments?
Yes, I have a few comments tonight. First of all, I wanted to share with the board that I ran into this guy this morning, and he started asking me about the roads and you know, all the potholes there. And I told him that while the DPW patching crews are waiting for the asphalt plants to open this time of year, they've been using a sticky binding product of recycled asphalt and vegetable oil mixed together to try to patch some of the holes around town that they can get to. And you know, this guy, he's an older gentleman, and he looked at me and he said, well, I was born in Brattleboro in 1959, and you know, I guess we've always had to dodge potholes this time of year. You just got to learn how to drive around them. But he was appreciative of the DPW staff trying innovative things to try to keep our roads up during this time of year. We've welcomed our new fire chief with 2 fires already this week. So I just want to encourage everyone to be careful with your stoves and heating sources, and take precautions in your homes and businesses to prevent fires so that Chief Simons can at least get through his orientation. We had a question about the EV chargers in the transportation center at a recent meeting, and I looked into that and learned that these were removed because we could no longer get parts for them. In fact, the last time they broke down, the facilities maintenance supervisor had to go out to eBay to find a used part to make them operable again. Then we just kind of ran out of options for that, so they decided to remove them. We're hoping to replace them with brand new chargers using NEVI grant money, but this funding has been canceled by the federal government. We're prepared to install new ones once funding becomes available again. Finally, I wanted to mention that on Monday, April 14th, Hell's Gibson will start their mural project on the Harmony parking lot wall, the retaining wall. This mural will be done with masonry and paint to celebrate nature within that parking lot. The town's select board and arts committee both endorsed this project in 2024. And that's all I have tonight.
Great, thank you. Are there select board members who would like to comment at this time? Okay. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? David?
Thank you. David Levenbach, District 9. I have 2 questions and then a request. The questions are, number 1, how many fully qualified officers, police officers, do we have on the street at this time? And then the second question is, how many fully qualified BRAT members do we have on the streets at this time? And then the request. And this arises from persistent questions about public safety, including those at Tuesday's listening session and the last select board meeting. And so the request is that the staff prepare a report on recent public safety incidents and have that report in such a way as we can connect it to the data that were provided to the select board, I don't know, maybe in September or October from the state partners, so that we can see what kinds of improvements we've witnessed in public safety with the staffing up of the police department. Thank you.
We don't know the numbers off the top of our head, but we are planning to have a discussion about the police department and its staffing and the budget.
Also, I will add that in the monthly reports to the Select Board, all of the most recent public safety incidents are reported to you every month, so those are all available in there.
Great. Anyone else? Ken?
Hello. I think at the last Select Board meeting, I had asked about the finance director and the assistant manager. And I've noticed that there was no announcement for a finance director, and the assistant town manager still hasn't been posted. With that in mind, as an ex-finance director for a municipality, and as well as a ex-town manager, I'll offer my services during this budget time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve?
Yeah, Steve Zaluzny. Just wanted to bring up some history, what I've seen through the years in Brattleboro that I think could be relevant as far as decision-making. I was born in Brattleboro, and I've worked and lived in this town for the past 69 years. My mother and 5 of her brothers and sisters worked in the cotton mill when the looms there produced fabric from raw cotton bales shipped in from the deep south. And I grew up around the corner from the cotton mill. This is my home, and I care deeply about these places and the history of Brattleboro, why I'm here. In the spring of 2023, I believe it was, I started to come to select board meetings. The first week following the brutal murder of 36-year-old Lee Rosen Pritchard, an innocent employee of Morningside House. This, for me and for this town, was a true tipping point. How did we get to this point? And as someone who has seen Brattleboro in its heyday and now today with its current challenges, I am deeply concerned and frankly sad that things have gotten so bad. We are a town in crisis, and here are some of my personal observations of the problem and some solutions potentially. The problem, what I have seen historically has been easier to receive services in Vermont than in Massachusetts, for example. In Vermont, you merely need to state that you have the intention of being a Vermont resident to qualify for a slew of services. And here's the problem. We don't have a strong enough town right now to take on all those extra bodies and need. We are currently inundated with need, and it is crushing our community. Since the 60s, Vermont has seen an increase in people in need moving to Vermont to get support. That influx of people accelerated with the pandemic. The reality is that people in need have moved to Vermont over the course of 50 years, becoming residents in need. This has affected the quality of life, and for middle-income individuals and families, that means a huge tax-hit tax-wise. And the influx of needy people has created many things. A huge number of social services relative to the size of the community, housing that is subsidized, housing that is low income, and some grant funding programs that are not effective. We have other things that have created tax problems, some of it being nonprofits that are not paying taxes, obviously. The middle class ends up paying more state and federal taxes than they should, with the nonprofits bringing more expenses to the town, not less. There is no justification to exempt them from being taxed. They have not reduced problems. They are creating larger municipal EMS, police, and other related service costs. Who pays for that if we want a safer community? The working taxpayers. Until they can't afford to or move to another state. The solution, one Brattleboro, will improve the safety of the town. I'm really glad to see that happening. It's what I've been waiting to see really for the last 2 years. We also need—
Steve, wrap it up.
Yeah. We also need effective state and local policies to reduce the load on social and municipal services. If we're going to be a hub for services, they need to be effective, and these policy changes would mandate social services be provided for Vermont residents and not for people coming to Vermont for services in the future.
Okay,
This will
Steve,
improve the health, vitality, and safety of our community.
thank you.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to submit your comments, if you have more comments, just email them.
Okay, Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Franz?
Good evening, Franz Reichsman. I want to address something that came up on Tuesday that has come up before and maybe therefore it doesn't need to be addressed, but since it came up, I want to address it. And that is whether there is a way to separate out the expenses of the EMS service from the rest of the fire department. And the way it came up Tuesday was a request or a reference to a request for that number of, well, what are you spending on EMS? And the explanation, which has come up before, is that there's no good way to separate the spending of EMS from the rest of the fire department. The personnel and the facilities are shared inextricably, and any number that you picked to represent a separation line between those activities would be arbitrary and inexact and almost by definition incorrect. Now, it is true that if we went through the work to create such a formula that separated EMS from fire, then you could at least track it year over year and see whether there were changes. But it still would not be an accurate reflection that would permit a calculation of, oh, well, here's what we're spending on EMS and here's the money we're getting for EMS, which number is bigger. That number is simply not available because the department is structured the way it is. So the people who are wondering about that, and especially if they feel that this question has been asked but avoided or ducked, that's really not the case. The case is that there's no good way to do that calculation in a way that would answer the question that was being asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. All right, shall we move on with our agenda? I believe so. So, regular business, item A, Select Board housekeeping. We have the rules of procedure. And there have been some changes based on the previous meeting. John, would you like to discuss what they are?
Sure. So when you met on April 1st, you looked at the rules of procedure like you do every year, and there was discussion around the issues having to do with if there was disagreement about what was getting placed on agenda. We conferred with Town Attorney Bob Fisher about this, and he had a good idea, which was to add a line to your regular kind of standing agenda that says adjustments to agenda, and that could be the place that if there was some discussion around the agenda for the meeting or for a future meeting, you could do it at that time. So we wrote up this little addition to item C3, subunit C, which is in your memo, and then also addressed it under the situation where if the chair and vice chair disagree. Those, I think, were the only two items of feedback that we had from you on this, and if you are okay with those changes and don't have any others, it's possible that you could approve your rules this evening.
Great, thank you, John. Is there a discussion on this matter? Further discussion from the Select Board members?
Not me.
I appreciate the changes that were made and happy to make a motion if that would be helpful.
Please do, Amanda.
Okay, I move to approve the Select Board's rules of procedures for 2025-2026 year as presented. And if anybody needs more clarification, we can.
Thank you. How about this side of the room? Does there anyone have comments that they'd like to make?
No, just thank you to the town manager for incorporating the recommended changes.
Great. You good?
Great.
Anyone in the public like to make a comment? Well then, I think we're ready to vote. All Select Board members in favor of Amanda's motion to approve the Select Board's rules of procedure for the 2025-2026 year as presented, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Great, that has passed 5-0. Now, the next item is FY26 budget redevelopment. Okay, so the first item is takeaways from the listening session. Is there anyone on the select board who would like to comment on something about the listening session or a general comment about the listening session? Oscar?
Just since we're here talking about it, just in 30 seconds to go through the things that I felt I heard. I think we discussed a lot of them before, but we heard comments about, I think specifically, requests to not have cuts to the police department, the library department, and the Parks and Rec department. We heard questions about EMS, a question about disentangling the EMS from fire, questions about budget process, planning, select board transparency. There were comments about trash, and there were also comments about growth and revenue. I'm just calling them out because later today, I think we're going to be talking about topics for our meetings, and I think we'll find a lot of them there.
Very good. Anyone else wish to comment?
I want to offer thanks to our town manager and town staff, especially Jessica Stickler, who's been giving us lots of notes to get us up to speed. I also want to give appreciation to staff department heads who've been inviting select board members for meetings to also get us up to speed and get more in depth on their departments. And I also want to just make a note that some things that came up on Tuesday, everything was incredibly important, but sometimes there is a difference between what a municipality is capable of doing and what we need from the state. And that area of discernment and research we'll be doing over here. And I also hope that the general public does too, because there are limits that we can do as a municipality without the backup of our state government.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. How about this side?
Well, I went through and I analyzed the draft notes to see the frequency of different topics that came up. And at the number of people who spoke to safety was the very highest, followed very closely by support for human services, followed by the arts was also something that was mentioned by multiple people. Support for the library, the Department of Public Works, and a number of other issues, including lowering taxes as a priority.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, so it's good. Thank you for bringing up the arts, because that was one thing that seemed to be a real kind of a common and strong felt thread in the room. The restoration of that line item to the budget seemed to be really important to folks, as did public safety seemed to be as you said, I did the same thing that you did. And, public safety seemed to be number one, the protection of the library, parks and recs, all the things that this community has grown fond of and used to. So I think that was good to have that reinforced. I still am trying to figure out how we're gonna lower this number. I'm curious to as I've been looking through, because I've been hearing a lot of people wanting to add things back in, but I didn't hear a whole lot of take things out. Maybe that wasn't the function, but I felt like it had, that listening session had kind of gone in that direction. People were often speaking about things that really weren't overly germane to the question being asked, but again, it's a listening session, so, we up here might know what those rules are, true to form, but, you give people a chance to speak and they will speak. So, and it was good. It was, I got some, I've got some clear direction as to what folks want.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all. I don't have any specific comments, and I'd like to open it up to the public assembled. I just want to make sure that it's narrowly defined to being comments about the listening session not necessarily rehashing it or adding to it, but just commentary on, general comments on what people heard and their takeaway. So, are there comments from the public? Isn't that nice? Very good. All right, let's move on to the next, because I think the next is a meatier topic. Opening budget remarks and general budget discussion. Let's start with the left side of the table. Are there members of the select board who have opening remarks?
I'm just reviewing my notes from what members of the public shared at the listening session on today's what's
Tuesday.
today? Tuesday.
Today's Thursday.
Today is Thursday, and we had the listening session on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, man, we're gonna get you through this.
So some of the things that I heard were, one is questions about, are we, and Kate O'Connor brought this question up, are we looking at just FY26 or a continuation? Are we thinking of the FY27 as a continuation of this process? So are we looking at these two budgets together? So that was one question about process that I had, that I heard. Another was, there was interest in talking about the substation, which I don't believe is part of this, but this budget. It's
That's
separate.
correct.
It's separate. But there was interest in talking about that at some point. And then there were also suggestions about using volunteers, concerns about too much, when we talked about what do representative town meeting members want to see change in the budget. There's a suggestion of saying too much money for the police department. There was also the ideas about fire and EMS. But one process suggestion was to look, and I believe it was Heidi Fisher who had made this suggestion, was to look to staff department heads for recommendations and guidance, as they'll know what would be most appropriate for their departments in terms of where money could be saved. And then the other thing that I heard was that there was from a couple of people, was interest in looking at the budget comprehensively, looking at where are the biggest expenditures, which would include personnel. So that was something that I had heard at the meeting, and just wanted to add those.
Great. Peter?
You know, again, it would seem like if we are, the only thing that I can kind of come up with for an opening remark is people really do kind of want to take a look at people's employment with the town as a way to reducing this budget. We all know, but for the new people at the table, we all know that I am not a fan of that option. I've said this over and over again, and I'll say it again. These salaries will go away. Those responsibilities will not. Those responsibilities will get shifted to other people. An example of that is here tonight with Seth, as opposed to our former assistant town manager running a Zoom meeting. And these are things that we have to think about long-term in our town. I understand the 12% is a lofty number, but I'm struggling to try to figure out whose job gets cut if we're gonna cut to the chase, because I've seen this sort of reaction over again, and it has a long-term effect on employees, and you end up losing valuable employees over time. I think there's probably a way to gradually do it. It's, with maybe not filling unfulfilled positions, but again, that's just sort of my opening remark as we launch back into this, which is much like it was prior.
Thank you, Peter. How about the right side of the table? Oscar, Amanda, do you have comments?
Sure. I have all sorts. I'm going to try to speak very just simply and practically about what I'm thinking about right now when I consider the problem we have in front of us. So I hope you'll understand that just because I say something now doesn't mean it's a final opinion. It doesn't mean my mind can't be changed. It doesn't mean my mind isn't open. But knowing this meeting's been coming, I've been thinking about this stuff pretty hard. Here's where I am currently at, and I think a lot of this won't be a surprise if you've heard me talk about these things before. I think in general, we're probably down to 3 or 4, possibly 3 weeks left of this process. I don't think that doing this, that it's wise or valuable to make major changes to the way departments work and how towns work in a 3 or 4 week period. So despite things I've said before and how they've been presented, I'm not suggesting we make huge changes to the budget in this 4 week period. I don't think that would be very responsible. I think when we talk about that concept, we're talking about basically strategically and comprehensively reviewing what the town does. Do we think it needs to do all those things? Do we think we can afford to do all those things? That's a long process that I, at this moment, would prefer to do over the course of the year, starting basically as soon as we finish this budget, we kick off the process of developing the next budget. And it becomes our major project for the year, and we spend most of the year on it. I think so looking at these 4 weeks, I think we should look for opportunities to trim and to cut. I think we should consider as a board adopting a hiring freeze, which doesn't mean no position can be filled. It just means that filling an empty position becomes an intentional decision of the board. I think in particular, and this may irritate some people, I think we should consider not filling the one unfilled Brat team position. I think it's a reasonable compromise for a department that was to be expanded by 9 positions overnight to instead expand it by 8 positions and see how that goes. So I hope that's something we'll consider. A couple other topics real quick. There are structural things we'll need to talk about at another meeting. A lot of people are bothered by the fact that we spent out of our emergency fund. How do we replenish that? Do people want $100,000 added to the FY27 budget to start putting that fund back together? We can absolutely do that. It'd be painful, and even $100,000 a year is going to take 13 years-ish to get us back to where we're supposed to be, and that's if we never have a deficit. We should look at are there opportunities to be a little more frugal with how we stretch our capital expenses? You know, if a wizard came down and said you never get to have a new vehicle again, I suspect we would stretch more life out of what we have now than we currently do. So maybe there are opportunities for savings there. For trash, I know it's a big amount. I don't see another option. I think we didn't have another bid, and the cost went up. The decision essentially has already been made by the previous board. They approved the decision in a meeting. So I think we're going to look at that decision in another meeting, but I think from where I sit, that's not really an option to find savings. We need to find some way to look at the EMS department and figure out if we think it is meeting the projections that we set out initially. I know that it's difficult, but we can't have this huge new department and be unable to evaluate it financially. We have to find some way to do that. If it's an estimate, that's okay. But that needs to be a priority. That's not for this 4 weeks. That's probably for this year. And then the last thing I was thinking about is that what I'm talking about is not a hugely different budget going back to RTM, and that's going to be an interesting conversation. What I would like us to consider as a board is accompanying the budget with some series of written, voted-on commitments that we make as a board to RTM. Examples could be that we as a select board vote to recommit to the 2012 policy on the use of spending from the emergency fund. Or maybe we alter it or change the language or strengthen it in some way. I think we could commit to defining existing funds clearly and creating policies around their use. I think we should certainly commit in writing to RTM and say, look, this budget isn't that different. We are going to do what you asked, a comprehensive review for the next budget. We commit to that. I think that would be, I think a lot of people are looking for that commitment. Couple other examples, we could commit to a tax increase goal for FY27 and say our goal is that taxes in next year's budget do not go up by more than 3 or 4%. We pick a number. Because one of my big fears with this budget, the 12%, is that I think a lot of the cuts that got it to 12 are just going to come back next year if we don't change something, and then we're going to be looking at another 8 or 10 or 12%. So if we committed to finding a way to have a lower number next year, I think that is something that RTM would appreciate. 2 more, I think we should commit to returning to, though I think they were tedious in their way, the department by department public reviews where a department head comes up and sits at this table and answers questions from the public and the select board about the budget. Even if it doesn't change our decision and we learn nothing on the board that we didn't already know, it will be valuable for public trust and transparency into what's going on. And finally, I think we need to commit to, I don't know the form, but developing some public transparent process for public planning documents that we put out on a regular basis and that someone can come back next year and wave it in our faces and say, you said you were going to do this and you didn't do it. Some mechanism for us to put our commitments down on paper. And just to be clear, these are things that I think we should discuss as a board as part of these 3 or 4 weeks, write them down, vote on them, and include them with our budget proposal to RTM. So that's what I'm thinking right now. I'm sure it will change, especially when I hear from all of you, but thank you for now.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you. This will be short. I've been doing a deep dive into revenue opportunities, and actually I think the failed budget might be an opportunity to introduce some new revenues into, in regards to permits and licenses, mostly permits, and more on that later. I think that the trash issue is not necessarily a done deal, and I've gotten the nod to let this be a project that I'm going to continue to work on with Patrick gone, someone at the table and potentially present some other options. It might be it may be, I don't know what the word is, a red herring, but I think it's worth a try. We have this opportunity. So I do think it's worth a try. Public feedback on that, you can email me, copy John and Liz, with if you have ideas, many people have. So I'm committed to still looking into it. That's all.
Great. I have some comments as well. I noticed in the rules of procedure that we just passed, they made this sentence. Select board members shall serve the best interests of the town, regardless of their personal interests, using sound judgment and taking into consideration all available information, circumstances, and resources. I intend to follow this guidance and the language of the charter regarding Section 6, general powers, duties, and responsibilities of the select board. I believe that the town budget is not just a piece of paper and not just a financial document, but it reflects the realities of providing a town government and a civil society for all the people of Brattleboro. I hope my colleagues will join me in listening to the public, listening to the town staff, understanding the comments, especially considering how to address the town's critical problems and concerns, and how to plan for our future. Our town government needs to meet the needs of our citizens while keeping check on financial soundness and financial priorities and what the town can afford versus what would be nice to have. We will consult with experts as needed and prepare a budget. I am hopeful that cuts can be made and revenues can be enhanced, and I'm hopeful that we will produce a budget that is both reduced and meets town needs. We'll submit this to the RTM for their consideration, and I hope that RTM also shares these goals of good government and financial soundness and provide for the needs of all citizens. Thank you. So, are there members of the public who would like to comment on our comments? Kate?
I wasn't going to, but now we have the fancy timer. Kate O'Connor, Brattleboro. I just actually really want to, first of all, thank all of you, but particularly thank Oscar for his comments, because I think it's not only addressing FY26, but it is also addressing FY27, 28, and the future. And I think that will go a long way, at least in my mind, to showing that you folks understand that we have a real problem here and that it needs to be fixed. And I think that's one of the big things that, the reason I voted no on the budget, not for you folks to whack it by $1 million, but actually to be thoughtful towards the future. And I also do hope that you'll engage the department heads. We've got some really, really great department heads who I know are strategic and thoughtful and will understand if budget cuts have to be made and help reimagine how our town government works. So I really hope that you'll rely upon them. But thank you so much.
My friend who's in the back standing first, and then Chris.
I'm sorry, I just came right up. Janet, I live in West Brattleboro. I'm in District 7, and I didn't hear anybody mention the general population, the vote. We voted for a budget that did not have a human service increase over 2%, and we voted as the public, not as the RTM, I'm not an RTM member, for increased safety. And I just want to keep that sort of at the fore. I know for expediency's sake, you have to meet the needs of the RTM. But what I'm saying is that the general public told you what we wanted. I'm here tonight. I don't wish to be here. I never want to come. But I came again because it seems as though, and maybe this is my own naivete, but it seems as though being here is meaningful, and it shouldn't be. My vote should be meaningful. I voted, and that's what you should be responding to. All of those people who voted. Otherwise, we're disenfranchised. You know, I realize the listening session was great, and I think everybody deserves to be heard, but that represented a small fraction of the population of Brattleboro, and it represented people who are sort of activists. Apparently I am at this particular moment, and I don't want to be. I voted, and the vote was clear. It was in the majority, and I want you to keep that at the fore in your deliberations. That's it. Thank you.
Chris?
Hi, my name is Chris Chapman, and I live in District 9. I just want to say that I believe the priorities should begin with police, fire, and Department of Public Works. The potholes in the roads are, I think, a safety issue, not just an aesthetic one about being able to drive on a smooth roadway. Fire department, when we really, really needed it, during the Brooks House fire, it delivered the goods, and the training was so good that a building that would have otherwise burned down and probably collapsed and damaged buildings across the street was avoided because the firefighters had been trained on knocking down fires inside a building. And without that certification, they could not have done that. When we really needed them, they were well prepared. That's why I think that fire department should be a high priority. And the police, I think, is self-explanatory after the series of crimes that we've seen in the area, some so bad that we've had to have not only municipal law enforcement involved, but also the state police and federal officers as well from the Drug Enforcement Agency and the FBI and alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. I wish, oh, how I wish that others could come to the fore and be of just as high a priority. But I don't think that's a practical wish right now. And I just thought I'd put in my 2 cents, hoping it would be clear and perhaps convincing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And were you on the select board when the Brooks fire occurred?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
But I had nothing to do with fighting the fire. I didn't have any training.
Duly noted, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, these 3 departments have done a great job of getting the job done, being professional and being able to work without constraints.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Commenters? Yes. People online.
Yes. we have
Dick's
just a bit.
iPad.
Trying to get my, okay, there you go, I got everything working. Dick DeGray, Brattleboro. A couple of things, I watched the meeting on Tuesday, and if we went by the meeting on Tuesday, you're wasting your time here, we'd just be sending this budget back to RTM. Something I know, because I've been through this process multiple times, is that every dollar in this budget has an advocate. And the speaker before, the previous speaker, the young lady who spoke, talked about the number of people at that, which is a minority of people in town. And so it's great to hear that they were advocating for this and advocating for that. The reality is the bulk of the community and the bulk of RTM members spoke to send the budget back to you. Now, I would agree, I would like to actually hear from every one of you about a number where you think this budget should be, and whether that's 12.1% where it is now, or 10% or 8%. I think that that helps the department heads, and I think it helps the town manager to help you in your deliberations where we could find cuts. I would agree with Oscar that the one position in the Brat team not be filled, but I also feel that you have an IT position in that budget that was approved, and here we are, almost 9 months out. It hasn't been filled. There hasn't been a job description, and that position should be eliminated. That is a no-paying cut, and if you want to look at a different way of doing that, by contracting it, there's a lot of savings there too. So the reality is there should be some cuts to this budget. I said over 2 weeks ago that you might go back at 10%. I would tell Oscar that the budget process starts in October. And so when you keep talking about a year, you're going to have 6 months to do your review to get ready for the budget process. It's going to come quick, and the next thing you know, you're going to be working on that budget. So you don't have a year. And so there's a board member that I spoke to about generating other revenue, which is limited in the community, which is going to come in the form of fees, which some will say it's a tax, but it's an increase in the fees. So there is ways to get this number down. I still believe that 10% would be an acceptable number to take it back to RTM, because there are reductions here that can be made. And people aren't going to be happy, but the reality is nobody's happy about 12.1%. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seth, are there others on?
Can I?
Online?
Could I reply?
Sure.
Okay. I just wanted to reply to the question of a percentage. Honestly, I think in some ways, 10 to 12 is a pretty good number, because I think trash, well, I'm completely open to new ideas, but if trash is sort of a fixed point, then you're looking at trash plus some sort of standard 3 to 4% increase, and that gets us to 10 or 12. The problem I have with the 12 now, and the challenge of what we're about to do, is that I think with some of the cuts that brought it to 12, a lot of those will be back in September or October for the FY27 budget. So if I was confident that 12 this year meant normal next year, 3%, 4% next year, I would think we're in the right ballpark. But one of the things we're going to need to do is look at the list of cuts that got us to 12 and make sure that we as a board feel good about all of those and feel that they're not going to come back in 6 months, as you rightly point out. So I would love to get to 10 or 9, but there may be addition that has to happen along with subtraction. So that's where I'm at.
All right, thank you. So, I got one. Yes, Christina.
Christina Cheyenne, District 8. Sorry, I came straight from work, so I missed all of, not all of it, but some of the beginnings. But I heard Oscar so bravely suggest that maybe we don't hire that last Brat team member. And I just want to be even more brave in a time when this is so controversial to say. But our police department has doubled in size in 4 years. Doubled. That's just up to the to the budgeted amount of police officers, not including the added 9 staff in an emergency situation about 8 months ago, which was, I know that people are saying things are better downtown, but I also was at the last select board meeting where one of our community members was doing the same thing, begging you to do something tomorrow and actually threatening violence on our other community members. And it was just notable because it was 8 months ago that you spent almost $2 million on the police department and still have community members saying, please do something, please do something. And to me, that seems like a sign that it's not just going to be the police department. And I think our police department are the first to tell you that there's a lot of situations where they can't do something, that where they say if someone has already injected drugs, they can't do anything because they've injected drugs. If there's someone selling drugs in one of the apartments, they can't go in. They have to build a case. It takes 6 months to 1 year. There's all these things that community members are still coming to you and saying, please do something, please do something. And you guys hear that as police, but you spent almost $2 million between the revolving loan fund, the emergency savings, adding staff on the police department. 8 months later, we're still hearing community members saying, please do something. And what I don't think they really realize is that we are working from a deficit of having 12 down to something around 12 officers just 4 years ago. And I live downtown, just outside of downtown, and it was probably about 4 years ago that I started half-jokingly calling Elliott Street the most deadliest street in America. And 4 years later, with twice the number of police officers, it feels different because we now have 26 police officers. So in a time where we are like, oh my gosh, we can't afford all of the things we need, it does not seem like sound reasoning to add 9 more police staff when we just went from 12 to 26 in 4 years. And we have to catch up to what our town feels like with that police presence. So when we're adding 9 staff unbudgeted halfway through the year, and we're sitting here with our town manager and our police chief saying, oh, no, we needed this, we needed this.
Okay, Christina,
I had 3 seconds left.
go right ahead. Is that it?
I see
We
a
have
hand.
Bob Ozer on the line.
Mr. Ozer?
So, Bob Ozer, District 9. Just, I want to drill down and maybe get some, and I don't want answers to questions here, but I think just drilling down and getting some of the answers as opposed to trying to speculate. I helped out at the cleanup of the cemetery the other day on South Main, and I think there were 5 Brat team members there, 4 level officers and 1 community member, community specialist. So I don't know what the numbers are, but it looks like the Brat team may be filled already. The questions I had were, can you identify where the increases, in what lines there were increases in the budget in the last year or so? And can you identify the largest increase in programs in the budget in the last year or so? And if you identify those items, can you then answer and say, is there a way we can do those duties less expensively? And I know Peter's argument was that the duties don't go away, they go to somebody else. But if there have been increases in certain areas, was that justified? Is there a different way to do that? The savings piece is a problem. You may have heard today that LIHEAP was defunded. So we need savings somehow in case things start to really unravel at the federal level. We talked about the EV chargers. You were planning to replace those with a federal grant, and the federal grant went away. So whatever it is, if it gets to be a real emergency thing that you are depending upon federal money for, and we have no fallback, we need some fallback. So yes, we do somehow need savings. So I don't have any good answers, but those are the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Do we have an answer for if all 4 Brat team officers have been hired or not? Do you know offhand, John?
We're going to have a presentation about the police in our deliberations, and we might as well bring it all up and then, rather than.
I guess, if you know, if not, but.
Well, we have three Brat team members hired, and the question from David Levenbach, I got an answer that we have 26 on the street right now, so.
So that's, okay. Great, thank you. Yep.
All right, so I believe that's everyone. No one else online, Seth? Great. All right, now we need to determine our future meeting schedule. And we have 4 meetings remaining? Is it 4?
You have 5.
5. See that?
I'm
Isn't
okay
that
with cutting
great?
it to 4.
Pardon me?
I'm okay with cutting it to 4.
Well, so we have, and I think, we've talked about this, Oscar and John and I, in agenda sending, but I want to hear everybody's thoughts about what they present as topics. Unless, John, you want to lead it off? Do you want to?
Yes, I think I can do that from memory. What you two were discussing, the possible items would be like, so next Tuesday, you could look at the Finance Committee report and structural budget issues related to what they were recommending before RTM. That would be one topic. Another would be solid waste. So dive into the solid waste decision and see if you want to revisit that or not. And then on Thursday, you were talking about doing, let me see if I can remember now, 3 things. They were the reductions that the last select board made, so revisiting those lists, the ones that they decided to do and the ones that they decided not to do. Also, you were talking about looking at potential service reductions in departments other than public safety. And then the third thing I'm not remembering now.
Structural implications of the budget?
No, that was in
Oh, that's
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Police?
No, that, non-police related ones first, to see if there's anything in those services that you would want to reduce. And then doing, the following Tuesday, doing a whole full session just on public safety and the police implications. So you would have all the time you need to delve into that. And I think that was,
And then the last meeting is, like if you took back our cuts and revenue suggestions.
oh, yeah. That was the third one for next Thursday is revenues. Like, are there additional
Revenues, yeah.
revenue ideas? Yeah.
Because I think all of us have some little tweaks and revenues to suggest. So that if that happened on, Thursday, that would give you time to present us with a budget on that last meeting in April that we can discuss and hopefully vote on.
I just wonder, we may want to work over the draft budget. The end of this process may be we get a draft budget and then spend the next 2 or 3 meetings like revising it and sending it back and getting it back the next time and then revising it again. I'm just a little nervous about the idea of like, we have a couple meetings getting information and talking about stuff, and then at the end of April, we get a draft. And then that's...
Well, that says to me, what I'm hearing is then if we get a budget on the 29th, which is probably, physically something that the town manager can do based upon our cuts in revenue, then we'll need more meetings after the 29th, if necessary, to discuss the budget that's in front of us.
Right. That's why I'm wondering if maybe, do we want to aim to condense sort of our like researching and getting information stage and try and get, also John, I don't even know when it's practical to get a first look at a draft budget. So if that can't really happen until the 29th or maybe the meeting before, then that's just a physical reality too.
From my experience, it's if we're going to have select board input as to what services may need to be cut and what other things that the staff has identified to cut and what ideas we have in revenue, and we do that, what day are we doing that, on Thursday? Next Thursday?
If you do some of that on next Thursday and then the public safety on the following Tuesday, you could potentially look at some numbers that following Thursday. And I think it's the 24th.
Okay.
You could look at some initial numbers on the 24th, and you could, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but then get turnaround revisions for the 29th. Then if you were close, you might want to warn a meeting at least, and then that would stick up to the schedule, and you might have another week or so where you could refine that so that we had enough time to get it printed and everything else. But
So 24th would be what you were asking for, and then the 29th is something that we might be able to coalesce around with minor changes or whatever. What are you thinking, Amanda? I see on your face.
You can tell I'm thinking. Well, in the spirit of expediency, I'm just wondering if our next budget meeting wouldn't necessarily be topic related, but would be nuts and bolts money related, revenues and cuts, and just go there, and not go by department. Just say like, okay, let's go. What are we going to do? And throw that out there for public feedback. That potentially could lead to a draft budget, a sketchy one, but at least would get get it out sooner than later.
Right. And I think the town manager would be happy to accommodate that with but the problem is that there's a lot of things on the agenda. Like that's not a special meeting, it's a normal meeting. So that's why the agenda setting committee added those topics to the Tuesday, and then the more open meeting, the special meeting about cuts and revenue on the Thursday, just because there's a whole bunch of stuff that's presently slipped my mind that need to be discussed on Tuesday. And that's the only reason why we're not having it sooner rather than later.
Sure, I mean, the following so a week from today, you're saying?
A week
when
from
that would be.
today,
That sounds
we'll
good.
have that opportunity, and then the following week, the following Thursday would be the rough budget for us to, discuss.
If I can just weigh in, I think, just for point of clarification, are we starting at the suggested 12%, or are we going back to the original 22% budget, which is where I think we should start?
You want to start on the 22?
Why not?
Because that means, because did you see the look on John's face? Because I think it's easier to start.
Oh, yeah, it's easier. Sure,
From-
100%.
from
Don't
where
disagree.
From where the last select board, the last dear select board had already
Love those
made
guys.
certain
Love these guys.
decisions. And we're going to revisit those decisions, but I think that structure is closer to where we want to be than the 22%.
So I had, if I may, I added, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let me finish. Sorry. Yeah, but we already know they don't like the 12%, right? So, meaning RTM rejected that, even when we tried to lower it to, it was rejected, it was rejected. So why was it rejected? When we tried to put it forth at 5%, was rejected,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but we have 12%, and we want to get it down. Thank you. We want to get it down lower, so.
Right.
Don't you think we should start with the 12 rather than the 22?
I mean, you can talk me off that ledge, but, I mean, what I'm hearing, and if that listening session meant, I'll get to my point. If that listening session that we had on Tuesday meant anything, I mean, I'm guessing that we're gonna be adding back in the arts budget.
Yes, but if I may, we have the 12%, and we will take that 12% and see all the cuts that were suggested that were or were not made. And if some of those cuts were made, we're going to revisit. That's the arts budget. We can decide a number based on that without going all the way back. It's like, what's easier in this short amount of time that we have?
Oh, no question. 12,
And
starting
so
from where we left off.
That's the easiest, and then we have all of these, we have comments from the public, we have experts about the structure integrity, we have the cuts that were made, the cuts that weren't made, we have, revenues that we want to think about. I'm very optimistic that we can do this. We can make cuts of a sufficient nature and add revenues of a sufficient nature that we have a budget that is more structurally sound than the one that was rejected, and everything's hunky-dory.
Okay. And just to clarify, when I was talking about the amounts that were rejected at representative town meeting, when they amended the budgets to a lower amount, is what I was referring to. And I didn't mean to shush everybody, but, we're just trying to work that out here in real time. So my apologies for the shushing. But, so that's, my point was to look at it. I agree, starting at 12% is, again, I'm off that ledge. You're welcome.
I'm so good.
All right.
I could do either. It's just that I've done a lot of work already on the last budget. If you more or less want to do like a lot of those reductions, it's easier to start from there rather than going way back and trying to figure out all that work that Patrick Moreland had done.
And I think that there's, thoughts and that can be added to those cuts and things, but I think the 12% is better, especially if you've already started working on it. Isaac, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to address both the question that Dick DeGray asked of us, as well as this conversation, which is around the percent increase and what is an appropriate percent increase. And I do believe that 12% is a lot and is too much. I also, what I heard at Representative Town Meeting was that while there was concern about that amount, part of the reason why I believe that people did not accept a specific number increase below that is because they wanted the select board, this new select board, to take another look at this and to use our best judgment as to what made sense, because they didn't want to lock us into a specific number without consideration of what that would mean in terms of reduction of services. And that's why I'm also not able at this point, Mr. DeGray, to be able to tell you a specific percent increase as a target, because I need to know what that would actually mean. I really appreciate both Peter.
Fish is fine.
Okay. And Oscar both talking about the possibility of, a temporary hiring freeze, for example, where you would say, okay, we're going to gradually, without drastically cutting our town personnel, let's look at, are there open positions, are there positions that have, where someone retires, and for a certain amount of time, if there's a desire to fill that, the town manager would come before the board, and we would evaluate that on a roll-by-roll basis. I mean, that would be that would be one possibility. That I think we want to look at the different ways that we can control the costs and limit the impact on the taxes for the residents. But ultimately, I think that the issue that I heard repeatedly at that representative town meeting was concerns around financial management, financial practices. For instance, the use of one-time funds for ongoing recurring expenses. For instance, a grant or a reserve or funds from a settlement, to use that to pay for a staff position, for instance. It's not a one-year position, but it's something that would be continuing indefinitely. But one thing that I think could be useful in this process is if we were to come up with what are the questions that we've heard from the public and what are the questions that we have that we would like to get answers to help us have that information we need to be able to make some of these decisions, and that we would provide that for the town manager. So, for instance, we heard the question about how many personnel are there in the police force. We heard an answer of 26, including 3 Brat officers.
Not including.
Not including. But another question is how many officers are in the academy? How many?
Right, and so let's just think about it. We've already had a rough discussion of what meetings, topics would be when, and if you all agree with that schedule, then there's a natural sorting of the comments that we've heard by topic. So obviously, all the questions about public safety would be at the public safety meeting, and all the questions about garbage and so forth. So that's a natural conclusion, and we all have notes from our listening session and the emails that we've all been getting and the questions that community members stop me on the street about, and I'm sure, grab your ears as well. So that's kind of easy. that when it's topic specific, that's when we raise those questions. And John heard them too, so he's right here. And another comment that I would like to make is that we are all lay people and not town staff. And, we need to understand that in preparing a municipal budget, we'll be listening to RTM and trying to make policy decisions, but there's a certain amount of expertise and a certain amount of the role of the town manager towards the staff that we all need to respect. And so we might be asking questions, but, John's town manager's job is the town manager's job, and select board job is slightly different. Yes.
Couple comments. My 2 cents on the 12 or 22%, I think I'm sort of happy either way. I think we'll go through the same process. If we start with the 12, we'll look at the cuts and see which ones we as a group like and which we don't. If we start with the 22, we'll look at the cuts, we'll see which we like as a group and which we don't. I do agree, it sounds like we are agreeing to have Thursday's meeting, which is sort of the next budget-themed meeting, start with a discussion of the cuts, which I think is good. I think we want to get to a baseline of like, okay, what can we agree on this list? Is there anything we want to add? Is there anything not on this list that someone wants to throw on that we can agree on? And then we have a baseline. We've agreed on this list and we're at 14%. Where do we want to go from there? So I think that's really good. I do think, it's 7:40. On the budget agenda today, we do have general budget discussion, and we have very few opportunities to just sit as a group and talk to each other and say like, oh, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts on this? I think there's, depending on what people want to do, there's some value in just, opening it up to general budget topics and getting to talk about things as a group, which is a rare opportunity. And the only other comment I have is that, informally, it sort of seemed like I heard 3 people express interest in a hiring freeze. I would at least like to bring that up now because, I would like to have a conversation about the last Brat position. And, it would be sort of sad if I came back next week and turned out like, oh, actually, we offered someone a job. Because these unfilled positions are a rare opportunity to possibly decrease ongoing costs without firing somebody. So they're kind of precious.
Hold on for just a second, because I think that it was determined that final member has been hired. However,
hang on, can we clarify that? I don't think that's the case.
We've been screening a final applicant and doing background and that sort of stuff. So
a single
this
final
is it's very disruptive to the management of the town to be having conversations about individual staff positions. What I hear when you're saying that you want to reduce the number of Brat team members is you do not want us to affect a policy of day and night Brat coverage downtown. If that's what the select board wants, if you want to just do days or just do nights, then I can figure out what our hiring would look like to do that and come back to you with a recommendation around that and what the budget cost would be. But I really need to know, like, what's your policy? What do you want to do? Do you want to have Brat team coverage for, the morning through evening, or do you want to have it overlapping so that you have morning through evening into the night? And that's really the question of reducing the budget for the police department.
So I need to respond to that, but I'm happy to wait. I think Fish put his hand up, et cetera.
well, first of all, I just want to say that, Oscar, in your earlier remarks, sorry, Peter, just give me a second. Your earlier remarks, you talked about the fact that the Downtown Safety Action Plan talked about 9 personnel, and you want it to be 8. it was reduced to 8. The data analyst was eliminated from the budget because of economy. And so I wouldn't want the public to think that the police department did not sharpen their pencils and see where they could economize while still achieving their plan. So just keep in mind that it is 8 personnel that we're talking about. Peter?
So I know we're sort of banding around this semi-filled, unfilled position. And I'm just going to remind everybody that when I first came onto the select board 2 years ago, I ran under the guise of people talking about our downtown safety issues. You know, as Christina pointed out, having a quippy little nickname for Elliott Street, and that can extend down to Flat Street. And we had a real problem. And I can tell you that I would argue that nobody on the past select board, this current select board, has had as many conversations with individuals, unique individuals, as I've had around our downtown safety and what can be done. All right, now, some of it, I'm going to agree. A lot of it is captured in a narrative, and they just want to reinforce that narrative. There's some of that went on here tonight as well. There's just things that are captured in a narrative, and it's hard as hell to break those narratives once they have taken root. So if we want to talk about hiring freezes, if we want to talk about not filling unfilled positions, that's fine. But back up to make a point moving forward. We heard from 7-ish people at our listening session about adding the $10,000 back in for the arts, right? So that's seven people, and you know, in my career, I have a way to kind of extrapolate out the numbers and what that might look like, but I am willing to put that number back in the budget myself and vote in favor of that, but I'm going to need to hear from more than 7 people, because I think also narratives can be hijacked by a certain outspoken bunch of people. But I do believe that this arts budget does need another look, and I would probably vote in favor of putting that back in the budget. To make my point regarding our BRAT team and our police department, I have also been getting a lot of comments about the good that it's doing, that people are beginning to return to our downtown. I'm getting nice anecdotes as opposed to, you know, doom and gloom and scorched earth policies and groups of vigilante people walking around to take things into their own hands. I don't support any of that. It's just the things that I've heard. So as we swirl around the BRAT team conversations and the police department conversations, know where I stand. And I'm going to stand on the side of them. I've watched them operate. I've watched them handle situations with a great amount of care and ease and kindness. It might not be received that way because they're all wearing badges and guns and all that, and I get that that's intimidating.
Not wearing guns, but. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about police department. Oh, yeah. Sorry. No, so I have seen our BRAT team also do the same thing and doing wellness checks on it, so there's a lot of good going on down there.
All right, so let's just say right now that this conversation is not on topic. You know, we've set forth what we're going to talk about in our meeting schedule going forth. We said we're going to have a session specifically on public safety. We'll be talking about cuts and revenues, but we will be excluding the discussion of public safety to have its own evening out, let's say. And so what we have on the table, what is being discussed, is really the litany of meeting schedule. And what we have is next Tuesday we'll be discussing solid waste, the RTM Finance Committee, and the structural implications of the budget. And then on Thursday, we'll be discussing the cuts and revenue. And then the following Tuesday, John was suggesting the public safety. On Thursday, we would have a draft budget.
Is that the 24th, Liz?
That's the 24th. And the following Tuesday, that draft budget would be a topic of further discussion. And without anything else under discussion on that note?
No, nothing else.
Yeah. So, do we think that that is a sufficient and logical arrangement of meeting topics? Yes, Amanda?
Yeah, so just sort of a point of order and request from John in terms of special topics. If we have, would you like us to provide you with, I'm not going to call it a memo because you're the only one who does memos, but sort of a proposal? And when do you want that by? And how could that help? And I'm wondering, the solid waste topic, there's a lot of work to do before that topic comes up. And I'm wondering, does it seem realistic to actually bring that, to do that, the next meeting?
I've started to pull together basically all the background information that went into that decision process. I mean, I think at that meeting, that would be the appropriate time to talk about something different. Then it would be following that we would need to figure out the numbers for that.
Okay, and then in terms of individual proposals, ideas that we have, send them to you. You want emails, you want phone calls, you want?
Either.
Okay, great. Okay.
Oscar?
I'd like to reply to earlier. Just quickly to Fish, I know it's hard for this. I know that when I'm the one to bring up the possibility of not filling this one position, that it can come across easily as I'm against the whole program or I don't think it's valuable or something like that. I really don't feel that way. I'm looking for ways to find small budget compromises in the face of what was already a really big, quick increase for the department. I got my haircut today at Jean's on Elliott Street. He loves the new programs. He's happy. I'm glad that he's happy. I want this to work out. I'm not here to dismantle it piece by piece or something like that. It's a lot of money, $600,000, and it's forcing our eyes towards, cuts in other departments. And I'm trying to make compromises where I can to make that less painful. So it's just an idea for the board to consider, but I just, I'm not opposed to this program. I want it to succeed. And then, John, I just have to reply and say that I am really going out of my way to approach the painful topic of cuts to a municipal budget as sensitively and thoughtfully as I can in a spirit of compromise. And there are things I would like to talk about that I have let go and not brought up. I think for me, it's a little bit of a bridge too far if it is offensive for me to publicly consider not filling an unfilled position because somebody, it turns out, is in the final stages of interviewing for that. I think at that point, we're making it very hard to talk about.
All right.
I would agree with that.
Let me just respond to something that John has presented to us over and over, and that is he's given us a list of services. And if you talk about the services that you want and the services that you don't want, and you talk about it in terms of what would be nice to have or what is essential, and that's how the select board should be making policy decisions and giving those policy decisions to the town manager, not individual positions that need to come or go, because there's people who come to work every day who don't want to be thought of as being on the chopping block. What's much more appropriate is to discuss, we don't need this service that a department provides. We need less of this, and then that translates perhaps to employees, but maybe there's different ways to skin the cat. And so that's just the tenor of the conversation that I think we should be having. We should be having a discussion about services and not people.
I'm going to respectfully disagree, and I have gone out of my way in all of these discussions to not ever mention a currently filled position or person. But if we are not allowed to talk about unfilled positions in the conversation about a hiring freeze, then I don't agree with that approach. And I think it's just simply, the thing I want to do is not have less Brat services. The thing I want to do is economize and find ways to reduce the budget. And I've been told over and over again that doing it by attrition and by hiring freeze is the much preferred way to do this, rather than considering actual reductions. So we have to be able to talk about that. And I really don't feel like it's over the line.
But we've also had conversations in this room this evening where people from the public have said, let's look at our major responsibilities, and our major responsibilities are police, fire, and public works. And so what we should be having in terms of a discussion of cuts and revenue should be in that discussion that we have scheduled for next Thursday, which is the non-essential municipal services. And, and then if you want to talk about the Brat team, if you want to talk about the public safety emergency that's going on in this town that nobody seems to acknowledge, then that's what we'll have on the 22nd of April.
So I just want to know what the board is feeling about. I'm worried about the scenario where we come back in a week and a half and a position that we were thinking maybe by attrition we cannot have this position, that position is filled. Is that a possibility we want to try to guard against or not? It's a board decision, but I would be sad to come back by default in a week and a half and find out that a decision has been made for us.
I just feel, I don't think, Oscar, you're understanding the role of the town manager. I think you're thinking I'm an administrator and I do what you asked me to do with each position. That's not what a town manager does. If you want to redefine my role and redefine my job description, by all means do that, but make sure you have the whole board asking for that. I manage the staff. If you tell me to reduce the police budget, I'll figure out where to reduce the police budget, and I'll give you a number.
And that's different from earmarking staff members. That's a different thing.
Agree to disagree, that's what I'm going to say, and move on for me.
Isaac?
Well, I'm first wondering if there's anybody in the public who's here who might have anything to say about this. I think I saw Mr. Levenbach.
We've heard that.
Well, actually, I haven't heard Mr. Levenbach.
Yeah, but we have a schedule, and that schedule says you want to talk about individual, public safety items, come to the meeting on April 22nd.
Point of order, we're way ahead of schedule, and there was a lot more time allotted for public comment that wasn't used.
I'd really like to hear from the public.
So
Mr. Levenbach has his hand up.
David Levenbach, District 9. On the question of hiring freezes, I understand if you are in the final process of a candidate who you've interviewed and who you're doing background checks, that's pretty late in the game. But when vacancies do appear, I think a hiring freeze makes sense. I understand the point about what are the services we want to provide and what kind of staffing do we need to provide them well. But you are in a situation of, I don't want to use the word emergency because that gets used badly sometimes, but you're in a particular situation where you need to save dollars. And as you go forward in the FY27 budget, then I think it's a point to say, okay, what kinds of services do we need to provide, and what does the town manager believe is necessary in staffing to make those services work? But for a short time, if you have a vacancy in one area or another, I think you should seize those dollars in this particular moment. The other thing is a hiring freeze, in my experience at universities, was always a general hiring freeze, but you could always come to the board, as I think Mr. Evans-Franz suggested, and say, there's a vacancy, but we need to fill that. And the board can say, yeah, go ahead, you're right. So, thank you.
Mr. Fay?
Thank you, Ken Fay, District 8. Liz, I want to thank you for saying public safety for next Thursday. It's public safety, not police. As the last meeting said, people were describing the difference between police and public safety. I've offered to volunteer and get a volunteer group for public safety. That's it. Thank you.
Christina?
Christina Cheyenne, District 8. So on the topic of the 12% versus the 22%, what I didn't hear suggested was starting the budget without unbudgeted expenses that were added during the previous fiscal year. Because when the previous select board, which the majority are not here anymore, decided to add the 3 police officers, 4 level 2 officers who are unarmed, called the BRAT, and then 1 resource specialist, and then 1 data analysis, so 9. So when you guys decided to add 9 officers and then you got rid of the 1 when you went down, I haven't heard it suggested that you look at the budget without the emergency addition of 9/8 positions. And especially considering, like you just brought up, Chairperson Liz, sorry, I stumble over how to address people. It feels so awkward. That it's really just about departments, like services in departments. So if we have a department that has doubled in size in the last 4 years, not including the additional 9 staff members added, it does make sense to not include those additional 9 staff members added in an emergency situation that was not considered in a budget process. It's like that was the whole point of having a process, was that before you add 9 staff to any department, you have a really deep analysis of how that will affect our town's budget. So how about you start with the budget without those 9 staff members added to one single department that has already increased doubled in 4 years, and then see what it would do to our town to add 9 staff. Thanks.
Heidi? Oh.
Heidi Fisher, whoa, this is high. District 7. Thank you, Oscar, for raising some very difficult questions and suggestions. And I really, I wonder, you talked about next Thursday being a meeting talking about cuts. And I wonder whether the board would ask Mr. Potter to ask his department managers once again, because we all would love to have all services imaginable, but we right now can't do that because of the financial situation. We clearly are looking to make cuts wherever possible. They might be small cuts. If there were big cuts, that would be fabulous, but we don't, we recognize they may be smaller cuts. But would the board ask Mr. Potter to ask his department heads, who know their departments intimately and their budgets intimately, to look at them again and see what they can do? Maybe they'll come out with new ideas. Maybe they realized that the first suggestions they made were the first level and that now there's maybe a second level. We are in a crisis financially, I think, for the town. And that's, again, those are the experts in their departments. Maybe we can ask them once again to look at it. And in terms of the positions, I don't know if you're aware, but the hospital has just recently, this week, or maybe it was the end of last week, has put on a hiring freeze because the hospital is in financial desperate situation. We keep getting messages from our CEO about restructuring or closing. I don't know whether you are aware of the level of that we as staff are getting at the hospital. So they've put on a hiring freeze, very logically so. And I think that has to be a possibility on the table for unopened position or open positions that are unfilled, again, with the consideration of if it comes to the board because there needs to be an exception, that seems like a logical way of doing it. The issues in this town go deep, and the hospital is in a very similar situation. Nobody wants to lay off people ever. That's a horrible thing to have to do. But we have to make very difficult decisions in difficult times. Thank you.
Kate?
Kate O'Connor, didn't really want to wade into this, but we hear a lot from the administration and certain select board members that the select board is a policy setting body. A hiring freeze is a policy of the town. So I think there's no reason that the select board can't say we want a hiring freeze because that is a policy decision.
Okay, Select Board. What we have in front of us is a schedule question. Oh, Amanda, you had a comment.
I did. I had 2 comments. Thank you. I wanted to respond to the increase in our hiring of police officers because that increase was in tandem with the need that was on the street. And I truly believe that. So I just wanted to share that. The other thing is we're in the process of asking our department heads to find budget cuts wherever necessary, consider changing the scope of work that might result in having to let somebody go. And so I'll ask you this question, and that is for our 2% human services budget. Are the human service agencies that are the recipients of money that our town has voted in with the 2% level, are they willing to consider with their boards refunding some of that to the town of Brattleboro for the sake of helping us out with our budget? And I would say particularly some organizations that have a very generous allotment that is bestowed to them. Now, I'm not saying for 2026 because it's the vote for 2027 because we'll be going back to RTM, but that's another kind of kit and caboodle that I do think is worth saying. If you're asking our department heads, if you're asking services to be cut, then we all have to join in that effort. And that could just be on the, like I said, in the good nature, good spirit, thank you, Brattleboro, we want to help out perspective that the individual boards of these organizations might choose to do. But I do think it's within the reason of talking about, so.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so are we ready to?
I gotta ask a clarifying question. All right, and I'm gonna just direct this at Oscar, because I'm really sort of confused as to the point he's trying to make when it comes to hiring freezes, unfilled positions, agree to disagree. So I'm just trying to understand where you are, and I also feel like we're being accused of not wanting to accept a hiring freeze when we haven't really discussed a hiring freeze. So I just want to put that out there. You know, I know people like to point fingers, and that's fine. But can you, I guess, just dumb it down for me? I'm not really sure where you sit on that position and what you're trying to convey.
Sure. I'm not trying to accuse anyone of opposing a hiring
No,
freeze.
I just,
Okay.
I don't care about accusations,
no,
I don't
but
care about any of that. I just
what-
want to know what the crux of what you're trying to.
What I was
point you're making.
asking originally was, does the board want to ask for a hiring freeze? Because it sort of felt like there were 3 people interested in that. So that was part one.
Okay.
The part about unfilled positions, agree to disagree, was about something else, which was basically that I don't agree that the select board's only role is to say, I want less of this service. I think it's entirely appropriate for a body that essentially plays some management role to say, maybe we shouldn't fill that position. I think that is an entirely appropriate act, and I haven't done this. I think if you surveyed the history of the Brattleboro Select Board, and if you looked at what other select boards do, you would not find that to be uncommon. That's all I'm saying. So I'm pushing back against the idea that the only thing that's proper for us to do is say, we'd like to do less leaf collection and then leave all the details elsewhere. That's my point there.
Right. So to that point then, now that I think I have a little bit better of an understanding and how it falls back to John, is it's us to set that policy, please correct me if I'm wrong, set that policy and ask John to execute that policy.
I think so.
Okay.
And that's what we'll be discussing when we have.
Oh, I'm not letting you get back to that easy. No, I'm kidding. All right.
That's what we'll be discussing when we have the meeting, yes. Have the meeting about cuts and revenue. So are we ready, board? Sorry, Dick, we're moving on. Are we ready as a board to discuss the schedule, proposed schedule of future meetings and future meeting topics? And shall I review the topics again?
Yes, please.
And the meeting dates with the actual dates
Sure.
on the calendar.
Are we ready to move on and end general discussion on the budget, is your question?
Oh, we did that a while back. Somebody brought that up again, but we were on the schedule, and that's where we are on the agenda. So,
I mean, I wasn't ready to move on, and it sounds like other people at this table weren't ready to move on either.
we were at some point, and then it moved back to that general discussion. But that general discussion was proposed to have our opening statements, and then we are scheduling the time when we're having more general discussions on the budget. And so if we have a discussion on Tuesday,
So just a point of order
Yeah.
here, it says under regular business, there's FY '26 budget redevelopment at 6:55, and then at 7:25 is opening budget remarks and general budget discussion. And I realize we started talking about the future meeting schedule, but it sounds that there's more interest in having general budget discussion. And so I'd be happy for us to finish the conversation about the future meeting schedule and then come back to that general discussion. But I'm curious what Dick DeGray has to say, and I think that there's more of this general discussion is really valuable. But whether we do finish which we finish first, it's up to you.
well,
I think it would be helpful after we review the schedule. Is that okay? I just need to get
let's
that.
review
Sure.
the schedule, and then we'll ask ourselves, what is the purpose of the general discussion when we've already determined that there will be subject matter discussions on particular dates? So a general discussion becomes
What does it become?
meaningless. If we've already decided that we're going to have specific meaningful discussions on particular dates.
Let's, if we may, go ahead and finish the schedule, and then we can come back to general discussion.
Sure.
Thanks.
That's what
I agree. That sounds great.
three of us want. That's great. Or 3 or more. So on Tuesday, April 15th, I'm proposing that we have a discussion within our regular scheduled meeting of the structural implications of the budget, the RTM Finance Committee report, and the solid waste decision. On Thursday, April 17th, is where I propose we have a discussion of budget cuts and added revenue. And that would be a special meeting. So the entire meeting would be devoted to that meaty topic. On Tuesday, April 22nd, we will have, I propose, the public safety discussion. On Thursday, April 24th, we would have a draft budget document for our review. And on Tuesday, April 29th, we could have continued discussion with perhaps a vote on that draft budget.
So one question, I guess there'll have to be a point where we, maybe at the end of the police meeting, but we'll have to give John some direction and say, for example, like, we'd like you to take these 3 cuts out and put these 2 in. Where would that make sense to have happen?
Well, there's the Thursday cuts in revenue, and those are cuts in revenue to everything but public safety, because the public safety
Okay.
department is on
So we'll
the
give him a lot of that
Tuesday.
direction
On
there.
the, on the Thursday.
That makes sense.
I think it's sort of incumbent upon us to make sure that we're coming forth with a plan
Yeah.
and a little better organized amongst ourselves too,
On the 24th, you said?
on all of these dates. But the public safety, police, whatever we're calling it, they seem to be in flux, that conversation, on the 22nd. And the 24th, can you just pose that to me again?
The 24th is when we expect to have a semblance of a draft budget presented to us that we can discuss in depth.
And in a perfect world, we all like it, and we come back together and we vote this thing through on the 29th.
I guess if we love it, we could probably vote it through on the 24th.
Don't get cocky. Okay.
Is there someone who would like to make a motion regarding the schedule that I presented?
I will motion that we accept that schedule as presented. Do I need to
Great.
go through it?
Is there a little
Amanda?
more discussion?
Sure.
I'm worried about Tuesday, April 15th, who isn't, right? But anyway, how meaty that agenda is, if it's solid waste and the Finance Committee report and budget structure. And it's just a lot. So, or if they could be rearranged somehow.
Well, there's other things on the agenda that night as well.
Right.
But the solid waste, we'll have materials presented to us. And we'll be discussing in summary fashion what was leading, the timeline and what happened and what led to those particulars. But I think there's a smaller amount of information that presents where we are and what's next. So, John, how would you characterize the discussion that we would have on the 15th regarding solid waste?
I think, well, we can go over the process that the last board went through in terms of making their decision. I think understanding that.
What if there are I guess I'm wondering, what if there's some new developments that have nothing to do with how fruitful will it be to review everything that already happened, rather than be a little more solution-focused to see if other things might be entertained?
Well, I think there've been so many comments about what happened that it's incumbent upon us to present that process for continued clarity. But we will be discussing what elements are changeable at the end of that discussion, where we are now and where we're going. John, do you want to add to that?
And I don't have any other ideas, Amanda, about what we could do differently without putting the town at some risk. So I wouldn't be bringing forward any of those, but if you want to.
If I could present those to you before
Sure,
that
yeah.
meeting as soon as possible, that would be, and then get your feedback on that before that meeting, that would be
Okay.
helpful.
Sounds good, yeah.
Great.
And then the other topic for that evening was the structural implications of the budget and the RTM Finance Committee report. And I think they merged together quite handsomely. Do you have comments, Oscar, on that part of the discussion?
Oh, I was just going to say, I would happily, I know you feel strongly about the solid waste part. We could put that one at the top to make sure that at least at the top of the finance section, so that it, if it needs to run long, it can. With that?
Or that just we get through it before everybody leaves, I guess.
Yes.
And it's just, and we yeah.
Nobody's left tonight.
It's early.
Yeah.
Good point.
All right.
Can I ask one other?
Of course you can.
So I'm assuming we're leaving solid waste in this discussion and the decision previously made in there just because it's a sizable part of the budget?
It's a sizable part of the budget, and it's something that we've had many comments about, including comments within the Finance Committee report. So I think it's worthwhile having this review.
All right, I'm just, based on constituents' conversations, it doesn't seem to be that big of an issue. Everybody wants their garbage and compost picked up. There's been ways on how to execute that, but, okay.
Well, I mean, a lot of people question that decision, so it would be incumbent on us to present all the elements that led to that decision, and then where we go from here.
And I think Amanda might be hoping to bring some new stuff also to the discussion, right?
well-
if it works out.
Well, I'll talk to John about
Yeah.
it and we'll see. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Great. And it's just, we're all open to that. But I just think what we're talking about now is scheduling, and setting a time for that is what we're doing now. And I think that they're.
And then it depends on the contractor, and it depends on a conversation with John.
Right. And then the RTM discussion, Oscar, does that make sense to you? The
Sure.
RTM and the structural?
Yeah,
And I think most people who are interested in this topic have reviewed your report. So it's a summary report, but it prompts the discussion on the structural implications of the budget, which I think are very important to our work.
And any former or new Finance Committee members who want to come to that meeting, you will be certainly welcome.
And I am a former member of the Finance Committee, and I see Dr. Reichman here, and there are present members of the Finance Committee here, and I've talked to many of them. So I'm sure it will be a lively discussion.
I have one. I feel like such
Go
a
ahead.
nudge. So with the structural budget conversation, will we also touch on 27 just structure-wise? Because that's an opportunity, and the next, say, 5 years, just kind of
I'm sure we can.
talk on some horizon
I'm sure we
stuff.
can.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these agendas are not set in stone yet, so not that it would ever happen, but if something got squeezed off the end of an agenda, we could find a home for it somewhere else.
Sure. Okay, so that's Tuesday. Cuts in revenue we've discussed. Public safety on the following the 22nd, and on the 24th, the draft budget. And I'm a little lost. Are we ready to vote?
Think so.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions.
Go right ahead.
One is, where might a discussion regarding a potential hiring freeze belong?
Budget cuts?
Cuts in revenue.
And have we set the representative town meeting dates? I remember we talked about setting 2, just in case.
Someone suggested 2. I think it's more appropriate that we get to the end of the 29th, and if we're ready to vote on the 29th, then we set the date then for the 1 and be confident that we've heard what RTM is asking for, that we've made the proper structural modifications to the budget, and seek to get their blessing on this budget that we're working on.
So that would be, let's say we approve the budget on the 29th, we would warn. Right, so if we do it if we wait until we've approved the budget, we only need to warn 1 RTM. It does, I think what we talked about the other time as an option is we can warn it earlier so that we basically have more, in the event that, the budget doesn't pass again or something like that. We could warn 1 for middle May. We had a couple dates written down. We don't need to go into all of that, but there was some appeal to the idea of warning 2 so that the first one could happen sooner. We would have a fallback if we needed a second one.
Well, I mean, there's always contingencies, but I'm of the opinion that we can be confident that we can make changes to the budget so that it would be acceptable to RTM.
If I may withdraw, I realize that I've diverted us a little bit, so maybe we can actually just go back to this schedule and then in the general discussion come back to the RTM, if that's okay, Amanda.
Oh, no,
Because
you've
I'm
made-
realizing
you've
that I've
made
gone
your
a
mess
step.
now. This is what it feels like.
Yeah, I have a question. So it's 10 days after we approve the budget that the RTM needs to, how many days do we need to warn it? 30 days. Okay, so this time of year is incredible, that time of year is incredibly busy for families, graduations, oh gosh, everything. So I think we need to warn it earlier than that. We need a template of a
Yeah.
day. And
Well, I
of a-
think that we had
so people can
prior
plan their lives.
discussions that we're talking about a weeknight.
Yeah, I say we just we put 2 dates on the calendar and see if we hit it, because otherwise it's getting later for the departments, it's getting later for citizens, it's just a big mess.
So warn it as soon as possible, just so that people have an extra couple weeks to try and schedule
Oh,
around it.
gosh, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
people are
I don't mean
going
just
out of
as in, that
town
doesn't
and
matter.
doing stuff, yeah, okay.
But, no, that makes sense to me.
Well, we'll take that under advisement. Let's talk about whether we're ready to vote on this schedule. Are we ready to vote on this schedule?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I am. I would just ask if we could advise the current finance committee members and the past finance committee members, or maybe the simplest way to do it would just be to send the schedule once we approve it to all the representative town meeting members, given that we really want to have boost the chances of our final budget passing, and there were questions about process, want to make sure that they're all aware of when the different items are being discussed and when they could weigh in on these different issues.
I think that's
Well, there's RTM and then there's the public at large, and all are welcome. And, this select board process is, of course, focused on the RTM comments as we can discern them, but it is also an opportunity for members of the public to identify their priorities. So, yes, there will be, enhanced public notification of our schedule and our meetings.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Nope.
Are we ready to vote?
Mm-hmm.
Peter made a motion to accept the schedule of the select board meeting dates regarding the budget. I'll go through them one more time. Tuesday, April 15th, structural implications of the budget and representative town meeting, and also solid waste. Thursday, April 17th, cuts in revenue. Tuesday, April 22nd, public safety. Thursday, April 24th, a potential draft budget, and Tuesday, April 29th, further discussion on the draft budget with the potential for a voting on a draft budget and notification of RTM meeting. All in favor of that schedule, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Okay, great, that has passed 5-0. That is the conclusion of our agenda. If there's people who want to continue the general discussion, I'd say that I would discourage that because I think we've had a general discussion of the budget. I think we've set forth the future meetings, and I think future discussion should be topic-oriented.
I think it would be useful to finish the discussion about when RTM will be held, as that's not on any of these 5 dates. And there are also there was a question that was raised earlier that I think would be useful to come back to, and I know that Dick DeGray had a comment that he wanted to make.
Is Dick still with us, Seth? What about on the right side of me?
I would happily, err on the side of continuing. Yeah, Dick's hand is back up, especially because we're, it's not even 8:30, so.
And you don't think that we've had enough meetings, is that it, Oscar?
I just think, the more sort of open, knocking stuff around type of conversations we have, the better it'll be. So I don't really know that I have that much talking left in me, but yeah, I'd like to hear Isaac's thoughts and hear from Dick. And
Dick DeGray, would you like to knock things around?
Looks like his line is muted.
Oh, he's here.
Joe, thank you. A lively discussion, spirited. A couple of comments. First and foremost, I think that your last comment about setting the special town meeting under advisement, I think if there's 3 board members that would like to do that, if somebody makes a motion, I do believe that you can do that. And although I may not disagree with you, Liz, in the point that you think the budget may pass at the first meeting, I think you're better off to err on the side of being able to get 2 meetings in instead of 1. Second of all, with Oscar talking about staff positions, it is under the purview of the board to talk about staff positions. I certainly was there long enough to understand that, to say, yes, the board gets to make those decisions and to have those discussions, and not just to tell the town manager that, okay, you give me a number and then I'll decide where to cut. That's not how the process works. And so from that standpoint, I would disagree with John. As for the hiring freeze, I'm a little bit confused. I can understand a hiring freeze if you're talking about not filling the assistant town manager's position or the finance director. But the position that I keep talking about is the IT person who hasn't been hired at all. And so if you say we're not going to hire that position, you, along with the other ones, you still have that money in the budget for those positions. And so what in essence does the hiring freeze do? It doesn't reduce the amount of money that the taxpayers are paying. The taxpayers are paying for a position right now with that IT position that has never been filled. There's no name you can attach to it. So I think it's perfectly relevant for the board to say, we're not going to fill that position. We want that cut out of the budget. And I don't think that's under the town manager's purview to tell the board that they can't do what they want to do with the budget. John gets to do with the budget after they decide what they want to do with the budget. So I do appreciate all of your comments this evening. It's nice to see a spirited conversation between you. It's been cordial, as I'm observing from a distance away, and I really appreciate it. And it's nice to have a lot of different points of view being expressed here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. I would just like to point out to my fellow board members that Dick's point about, for example, the deferring the IT coordinator is on the list for us to discuss, and it says possible reductions not taken at the Select Board's December 17th meeting. So in our discussion on Thursday, April 17th, is exactly that. We will be discussing this. So talking about hiring freezes and blah, 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 it is embedded specifically in this discussion that our town manager brought to us. The previous select board chose not to cut. I would certainly open and willing, as I'm sure my colleagues are, to discuss these, to discuss further reductions that were taken, but certainly these discussions that were not taken, and there may also be further cuts yet to be discussed. So personally, I think we're talking semantics, but, you know, will be discussing cuts to the budget and revenues to the budget on April 17th at 6:15. Oscar?
Two minor things. The only reason, the reason I think it's not purely semantics is just that if we were to come back at the next meeting and find out that the IT coordinator position had been filled, that would mean we would
And
have
that's
lost
not
that
gonna happen.
opportunity. It may not happen with that position.
It's not going to happen. Yeah.
It's not going to happen with that position then, but there are other unfilled positions. The other thing, I just realized that, because we talked about this like 100 years ago today, I do think we should consider the possibility of including sort of a statement of commitments about next year's budget with our budget process. I think that is a way in which we can justify to our team, like, this budget is not going to be dramatically different, but we can say, like, look, we heard you. We're going to look at some things.
It could be dramatically different.
It could.
We could take hundreds of thousands of dollars off this budget.
Yes.
But what we asked and answered when you said this about the future budget is that that's what we would be discussing under the topic of the structural elements of the budget and the RT
great.
and Finance Committee. So I just think that we should be thinking of all these general comments that we have and placing them within the schedule and the topics that we just voted on.
I am happy to do that.
Are there other board members who would like to comment?
Are we commenting on, the schedule's been voted on and accepted? I agree that sussing these things out here, as opposed to the times that we have set aside to discuss them, is, we should do it then, and not just kind of come out now. Most of us are fairly accessible via email, conversation. All of our information is on the town website. You're welcome to reach out to us at that point. As far as an RTM meeting goes, I think if we want to move on and discuss that, I'm open to that.
All right. Why don't we hear these two hands that are up? The person behind Christina.
Good evening. I'm Megan Gray, new RTM district member. RTM member, District 9. It's getting a little late for my brain. Madam Chairperson, may I ask whether I may address another select person for clarification on a
Ask
comment.
me the question and I will direct.
My question is whether Amanda Thurber would help me understand with more clarity the suggestion I understood to be, we ask as a gesture of good faith for human services recipients of funds to refund funds. And my understanding was it was for fiscal year 27. Or was that meant to be part of a discussion for this year's budget?
Well, the interesting thing, Megan, and the interesting thing about Amanda's comment, and I'm sure she would love to answer you, but let me just say that this select board and this select board budget process will be silent of the human services budget because it is out of our purview. Next year's human service budget, we may have more latitude. And so I think that's what Amanda was aiming at, but I'm not going to speak for her. I will ask. Amanda, would you like to comment?
Sure, I'm happy to comment. Yeah, I mean, those funds were voted for at RTM, right, by number, if I remember correctly. So that's coming off the budget. But I wanted to just offer, for the sake of consideration, that, you know, it would be generous and in good faith if some of the larger recipients might say, you know what, put that back into the budget. Like, ease the burden on the taxpayers this year. I doubt that it would happen, but it might, and it could be a gesture of goodwill. We are mutually dependent in our community. We realize that very much, and town departments are sacrificing as much as taxpayers, as much as anyone. So, just a point of thought.
Thank you. May I ask one brief follow-up question? Thank you so much. My understanding is that the Human Services Committee undertakes an involved process in soliciting each organization regarding their needs and their requests per fiscal year. That's my understanding. Based on the 2% of the overall budget that Human Services represents, am I making the assumption correctly that you would anticipate with this idea that we would reap a significant financial take back? And would it come through, I'm wondering, forgive the unclarity of my question, I think it comes from not quite understanding the idea, which I think is interesting to entertain, because it could be applied perhaps towards different departments or groups of departments like Human Services, like Public Safety, like the Arts Fund. So I guess I could just leave the question hanging. We could discuss it maybe anon. How would it work in terms of
Megan,
the committee's work?
This is voluntary, and I would like to announce to the community as a whole that anyone who would like to pay more taxes is certainly welcome to, and anyone who would like to contribute in any way to the community's budget, they're certainly welcome to. And so in that same spirit, Amanda's asking, do the recipients of Human Services wish to relinquish some of their grant? And that's a highly speculative question, and I don't think it's one that really requires an in-depth discussion of where that money, if gained, would be placed in the budget, because I think it's just too speculative a question.
And I do know that there are some departments that do a lot of fundraising, and one of them is Rec and Parks, annually. From grants, from citizens. I mean, and some town departments are the recipients, and many town departments are the recipients of grants as well. And so we're kind of all in this together, was my sentiment we're really all in this together.
And let me just say also that because the human service budget is really not part of this discussion, I'm going to have to say that it's not germane, and you two can talk about it offline, but it's really not part of our work in this month and certainly this evening. So
Thank you for your time.
Heidi, you're the last questioner.
I was just going to ask if, to please, if there's any way that you can set dates or potential dates for the RTM, because as Amanda said, you know, it's a busy time of year, et cetera. But even if it's an evening, I sometimes work evening, I'm sometimes on call evening. But if I know in advance that I have to be free a certain night, I can switch with someone. And I'm sure other people are in similar situations. So I think it really would be helpful to have a date as soon as possible for when that meeting might be. And I think setting 2 would be good. And if we don't need the second one, great, we don't have the second one. But at least we'd have the dates set aside.
Yeah, and let me just say that it's expensive to host a town meeting. And so if we have a second town meeting, you know, there's our arts funding. So we will discuss that at our next meeting. Okay. And I think that we have reached.
There's another member of the public who I don't believe has spoken yet.
Would you like to speak?
A little more.
Oh, okay. I want to put my hand on it so I can. Okay. Thanks, guys. I'll be real quick. I just wanted one point of clarification, and that was to ask, has there been a decision made to wait on open positions so that the select board can discuss it? Or has it been decided that the town manager will fill those positions before there can be discussion? Thanks.
That has not been determined. All right.
I think it's something that we could discuss, and I'm interested in, Oscar, if there's a particular proposal that you wanted to make around that.
I mean, I guess I just see these unfilled positions as a valuable way to not have to consider eliminating existing positions, which is way harder and more painful, as we all agree, and as I've been told many times. And I would just love to, I don't know how official it has to be, but I would be really disappointed if we got to our meeting on cuts and a position had been filled. If that could not happen, I would be content with that. But
I'll just say that we freeze positions all the time, ones that we don't think will make sense in the long term. We have several of those frozen right now. We have other positions that we need to fill really badly. We need to have somebody running the wastewater treatment plant. You know, if I have to bring every position to the select board for approval to fill, I feel like that is not consistent with our charter. It's not consistent with expectations around management of the town. And it also is, it leaves us really at a disadvantage for getting work of the town completed. That was my only point before. And, you know, I would ask for the respect that I'm managing the town well in terms of how we're hiring and not hiring, so.
how would you like the board to hypothetically go about the process of, let's say we didn't want to fill, I'll choose an example that I'm not really considering, the finance director role. If we felt we didn't want to fill that role, how would you like us to approach that?
Well, you would reduce the budget in the finance department, and if it didn't make sense to fill it, we wouldn't fill it.
I mean, that means really, if you take John at his word and say, these are the services of the finance department, which service would you like to eliminate? And then you say, because it's very particular, you'd be saying the duties that are performed by the manager. And actually right now, we have a consultant to do that work. Yep. So that's these are all particular discussions.
I feel they're operational decisions. They're not policy level decisions, and that's why you hire a manager. And if you disagree with that approach, then, relook at how you want to run the government. That's fine. You can do that. I'm happy to do that with you if you want.
I am out of fighting energy on this topic for tonight, but the energy will return tomorrow, and we can continue to talk about it.
I will add that I do believe that the downtown safety action plan, that was a policy decision by the board, and so discussion of positions within that is definitely a policy consideration.
Yeah, and it should be duly warned for that and considered under a warned item.
And guess what? We have a discussion.
Coming up on the 22nd.
On the 22nd of April,
Right.
we will have the discussion,
And I
I
will
think.
caution that during those conversations, that all of that policy came from overwhelming public response. Overwhelming.
Let's revisit this on the date that it's
Oh,
scheduled.
okay, that's great. Would anyone like to bring this discussion to a close?
No, I'd like to go back to the question about the RTM dates, because we
Yes.
heard from multiple people that they would like for scheduling. It would be very helpful to know when those dates will be. I also heard multiple people say that they would like to have us schedule 2 dates. It doesn't mean that we have to have that second meeting. It means, like, when I was representative town meeting, a couple years ago, it was scheduled for Saturday and Sunday. Just in case we didn't get through everything on Saturday, we had Sunday as kind of the overflow day. That seems very smart. We keep on hearing people talk about how they want planning, and this is a way to plan. This is a way to set us up for, okay, just in case. And it also shows respect for a representative town meeting as the arbitrator, as the final decision makers on the budget. So I'm going to move that we warn 2 dates in May for representative town meeting.
Now, wait a minute.
What are those dates?
If we have a meeting on the end of May, let's say Thursday, May 29th, and if we have a budget and the budget is not passed, then how do you anticipate scheduling a second meeting without time for the select board to alter that budget that did not pass? It's not like we can't go to the next day as we do from Saturday and Sunday and say, give RTM another crack at it. They will have decided. And if they decide in the negative, we cannot schedule that now. We have to resume this procedure again and set a date. And it's likely that we could not do that before July 1st. And so that's what we're talking about when we calmly say, let's schedule 2. It will be within the time period of the next fiscal year. So we have to be clear-eyed to, first of all, focus our attention on the budget that, in our best efforts, will reflect the needs of the town and reflect comments that were made regarding the budget by RTM. And as I said, I'm hopeful that that can be done. But the second RTM meeting cannot be easily scheduled at present. John?
I would just add that, so you have to warn the RTM at least 40 days and no less than 30 days ahead of the date that it was. So right now, you could warn a meeting, even though this wasn't on your agenda to warn a meeting tonight, so you really should even be talking about it. But you could do it 30 days from now, which would put you in mid-May, or you could wait till you have a budget put together here, say that's the end of April, and as you discussed, I think at a previous meeting, you could then warn it for like the 29th of May, or the, 28th, 29th, 30th of May, sometime that last week of May, on April 29th, which would be your last meeting on the schedule that you discussed tonight. Does that make sense?
Let's go doomsday here.
Make the motion.
Well, hang on. There really is a thing about kind of making decisions on non-warned items. So I just need some clarification on that, because this is not a warned item.
This is really not germane. It's not on the agenda, and I don't feel comfortable in setting a date tonight. I think, it's appropriate to have this discussion about how a meeting is warned, but I think, when we're talking about setting the meeting schedule, which we have done, and we've had all the discussions on the agenda tonight, I think we need to think long and hard and bring this scheduling of the RTM to a warned meeting where we can make that decision.
So my suggestion and my thinking is, do we have enough time to rewarn the next meeting with this item on there?
John?
I would advise that you don't do that, but stick to the schedule that you voted on tonight and try to do that, because you may get to the 29th of April, your last meeting, and realize, oh my gosh, we need another week or 2 weeks to hammer this out. And so you might want to push into June for that RTM. That is possible. So I would urge you a little bit of caution there.
And what would the ramifications be if, again, I'm just scraping it, that's all I'm doing here. If we warn this at the next meeting, set the date at the next meeting, and then canceling RTM, should that be? Because I just, there is a process to all of this. I don't particularly care for it either, just to be clear. Sometimes it seems like a pretty simple thing. Let's just warn a couple of meetings. But there really is a process and things that we can and can't do. And this is under the can't do pile. And
Already, this entire discussion has not been warned.
I see determine future meeting schedule under budget redevelopment, and to me, RTM is part of the budget redevelopment.
Actually, no.
No, because it's
It was
budget.
intended to have this discussion about select board meetings because we are in fact the select board. And a determination of the budget will determine when we warn for RTM. It's a separate item.
I think at the very least, the fact that RTMs have to be warned within sort of a window of between 30 and 40 days, I think that kind of rule, I laughed at the very beginning because I just, for some reason, hadn't thought about it at all this way. But I think that does kind of knock out the concept of warning two, because we could only warn the second one 10 days later than the first, and we'd have to redo the budget in that time. And we can only warn the budget 40 days in advance at most. So that's kind of the outer limit on how much notice we can give people about scheduling, it seems. I think there's still some value in scheduling, not that we do it today, I'm happy to defer on the sort of warned, not warned part of it, but there's some value in setting it earlier in May and saying like, yeah, we may not pass the budget on the 29th, maybe we need a meeting or two, but if we have RTM set on like May 20th, we'll still have quite a bit of padding there for extra meetings if we need to finish some last bit of work. And that might give us the padding we need in the unlikely but very bad event that we need a third RTM, and it might let us get it in, for example, before July 1st.
And
So-
I don't want to discuss this any further because I don't think it's germane, but I will say that we shouldn't be padding. We shouldn't have any discussion about padding, lest people think we're trying to pad the budget, which in fact we are not.
Yes. So do we need to put something on a future agenda, a specific meeting agenda, so that, for warning the RTM? Because it sounds like we do.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to incorporate that into our schedule of meetings or just do it on the fly in an agenda setting meeting
We'll
as
do
we
it
go?
in agenda setting and report to the body.
Is that okay with you guys? That as we get further through the budget process,
Oh, no, I want this decision made right now. Oh, no, we can't do that.
yeah.
No, of
Does that
course.
sound okay? Isaac?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, people. I think we've had a lively enough discussion for one evening. Anyone like to make that final motion?
A motion?
Go ahead, Peter.
No, you wanted to do it, go. No, I saw your hand go, go.
Oh.
Oh, that's it, we're never getting out of here. I motion that we adjourn.
Peter has made a motion to adjourn. All members in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Thank you all. Thank you, members of the public. Thank you, BCTV. Thank you very much, Seth.
Can of worms, is that what you said? Yeah, a series of them. Well,
I put all my budget materials in.
oh yeah, I guess I'll just leave both.
Remember that Jessica has asked us to keep our notes.